Hi guys and welcome back to the early bird photo news. It was quite an exciting day today for us Canon shooters, with Canon announcing not one, not two, but three new exciting lenses. We speculated about the first lens a little while ago, but then it got very quiet about it, and now today it was finally announced. I'm talking about a 24-105 lens with an f-stop at f2.8, which is pretty amazing. This new lens is huge and quite heavy, basically the size of this old EF 70-200 f2.8 lens. So the lens has an 82mm filter mount and comes in at 1.3 kilos or 2.9 pounds. Oftentimes I use the 24-105 I'm currently filming on, but in certain situations it just doesn't dissolve the background as much. So a 2.8 lens would be very tempting. However, like with all great lenses, this lens unfortunately comes with a huge price point of almost $3,000 US. Now, when we look at the lens, we see a few things you might ask yourself, what's all this about? The first items you might find strange is those screw holes in the lens, and they are for an external power zoom adapter you can buy that then allows you to zoom super smooth for video. All in all, this seems like a fantastic lens for everyone who needs that extra f-stop compared to a 24-105 lens, like wedding shooters for instance, or a lot of videographers. For these guys, and maybe me included, I don't know yet, this will be a great lens. Obviously the price point of $3,000 US or probably $100,000 down here in Australia is a little bit steep for most people, but I guess whoever needs it will be willing to pay this price because I assume it will perform very well in the field. What do you guys think about this lens? Is this something that tempts you, or are you saying at $3,000 for a 24-105 you're tapping out? The second lens is the one I'm the most excited about. I broke the news about the Potential's RF 200-800mm lens a few weeks ago, and now it finally was announced. The new RF 200-800mm lens is definitely a direct competitor to Sony's 200-600mm and Nikon's new 180-600mm lenses. And Canon did what it has done in the past successfully with the 100-500mm lens. Instead of sort of copying the lenses one to one, they gave the lens extra focal length, but at the same time were paying for that with a slower f-stop. Now, if you ask me, in the 100-500mm lens, this was done very successfully, and it's one of the best lenses on the market. And how it will work in this new lens, we'll have to wait and see once we get it into our hands and see how it works in the field. Just like the 24-105, the 200-800 is also not a small lens, coming in with a 95mm front element and weighing about 4.5 pounds or 2 kilograms. That sounds heavy at first glance, but if you compare it to the competition of Nikon and Sony's lenses, it's actually a little bit lighter than those lenses, so that's great. However, I think it's slightly longer than the two other lenses with a length of 31 centimeters or 12.4 inches. As expected, and as we talked about in my video last week as well, the new 200-800mm lens comes with an aperture range of 6.3 at 200mm and f9 at 800mm. Now the Nikon and the Sony lens are both 6.3 at 600mm. So the big question will be, is the Canon lens also going to be 6.3 or something else? And according to Gordon Lang's video, the 200-800mm lens will be f8 at 600mm and f9 at 800mm, of course. So the latter, the f9 at 800mm, is quite competitive. It's similar to the Sony and the Nikon lens with a 1.4 extender attached, but the f8 at 600mm feels a little bit disappointing, I must say. I know from the 100-500 that you can definitely deal with it in the field and you can just use higher ISOs, but something a little bit more wide open would have probably been nice. Do you guys agree? Speaking of things not everyone is gonna love, the 200-800mm lens will be an external zoom lens. Now, we already expected that to be the case because otherwise the lens would have had to be huge and would have been very hard to put it in a backpack, for instance. But at the same time, I know not everyone is loving those external zoom lenses. Personally, with the 100-500mm lens, for instance, I never had any issues and I've used it in heavy rain, so it was never a problem. But with this new lens being weather sealed to a degree, but probably not the same degree as an L lens, it's definitely something to keep an eye on because you don't want to be caught out in heavy rain and maybe damaging the lens. So while Canon says it's weather resistant, whatever that means, it's probably not the same to like the 100-500. So it's definitely a slight area of concern, even though it's better than no weather sealing, isn't it? Unlike most of Canon's latest releases, this lens is actually very attractively priced for most people and sits right in line with the Nikon and the Sony lenses. I think this lens is very nicely priced and will be very attractive for many wildlife photographers. Are you one of them? Let me know in the comments. Probably the strangest part about this lens is that the massive tripod collar and lens foot cannot be removed at all, and because it's not an Arca Swiss style lens foot, to be able to use it on a tripod you will also have to add another lens plate to the bottom of the lens. So this is definitely not great if you want to try to squeeze it into a smaller sized backpack. On the lens itself we can find programmable lens function buttons, and the lens also has one ring on it that can either be assigned to be the manual focus ring or control ring. The minimum focusing distance of the lens is adequate, but nothing to get too excited about. It starts at around 0.8 meters or 2.6 feet at the 200mm mark. At the 600mm mark, it's 2.8 meters or 9.1 feet. And at the 800mm mark, it's 3.8 meters or 11.4 feet. Of course, the lens also comes with image stabilization. The Canon says it's up to 5.5 stops, and on the shorter focal length it also works in combination with the IBIS, but on the long end it doesn't actually work together with the IBIS, so you only have the image stabilization in the lens available. So while I think the image stabilization will be good, I suspect it to be not as good as Nikon's latest offerings, which have basically been mind-blowing. Looking at the lens, I hope Canon didn't paint it white just for fun, because the white color usually stands for high performance in the field. For this lens to be successful, I think it all comes down to how sharp it is at that 600 and 800mm mark. And whether you take photos with an old lens or buy a new lens, I'd say it's very important that you learn image editing, because that's the fastest way to improve the look of your photos. And I would love to help you get better at image editing and faster with my masterclass and my PROSETS. With my PROSETS, I allow you with just one click to transform your RAW files to get great results during the editing process. And in my masterclass, I teach you step by step everything you need to know in Photoshop, like layers, selective color, curves, the liquefying tool, and so much more. So if you want to improve your editing and get the best results possible, make sure to check this out down there in the description. I know a lot of you guys also ask whether the 200 to 800mm lens will work with the RF teleconverters, and it looks like it will work with the 1.4 and the 2x extender. While the 1.4 extender doesn't seem to affect the autofocusing area too much, the 2x extender actually gives us quite a small box only for focusing, quite similar to what we see on the current f11 800mm lens. In saying that though, and especially because the lens is wide open at f9, this is probably not a lens that you're going to use with teleconverters very often, but if you want to, it works. And it's also great to see that it doesn't have the same design feature the 100 to 500mm lens has, because if you attach an extender to the 200 to 800mm lens, it still zooms back all the way, which is great to see. Speaking of things I'm glad to see, it looks like the 200 to 800mm lens will come with a lens hood, unlike some of Canon's other sort of cheaper offerings. As you can see, I'm not holding that lens in my hand yet, and it didn't look like many YouTubers didn't get one at all, so I'll have to wait and hopefully get my hands on one very soon so I can make a video for all you guys and share my thoughts on the lens and inform you how it performs in the field, so you can make an informed decision whether you want one or not. So what are your thoughts on this lens? Have you ordered one already? Are you going to get one? Are you waiting for summer reviews? Let me know in the comments. And in case you didn't know how to hold a lens in the field, here's an image that I found on the B&H photo website. Although I don't know if I would actually recommend that technique in the field. And I almost forgot, Canon also announced an RFS 10 to 18mm lens, which is great for people who need a wider lens on a camera like an R7 for instance. Although at the same time, I usually don't really recommend people to buy RFS lenses, simply because if you ever upgrade to full frame camera, you can't use those lenses anymore. However, if you know that you will stick with an R10 or an R7 long term, then they're definitely a more price-friendly alternative. That was a lot of Canon talk this week, but to wrap up this video, why don't we look at some Sony news. It seems quite certain that next week on November 8, Sony will announce a new awesome prime lens, the 2.8 300mm. And going by the other prime lens, I'm sure will have great image quality, will be a fantastic lens, which is hopefully also not too big and too heavy. Alongside this lens, there was the rumor that they would also announce the A9 III, but this hasn't been confirmed yet, and it seems like this camera may only be announced sometime in January. There also was a rumor that alongside that lens and the A9 III, there would be a new firmware update for the A1, which would be awesome and hopefully adds things like eye tracking in video mode, but that also seems to be not so sure anymore. This may get announced next week, early next year, or possibly never. I hope not for all Sony shooters, but we don't know at this stage. So fingers crossed that we can all spend our hard-earned money on some new gear very soon. And if you like this video, please give me a thumbs up. Let me know all your thoughts about the new gear in the comments and hit that subscribe button. And I will see you in a new video very soon. Bye guys.